Well, hey guys, welcome back to our podcast on all about being together. So today we're going to dive into some pretty serious stuff, talking about what it looks like to lose trust and rebuild trust in the church, and just what do we do when we are hurt or hurt by community around us. So once again, I am joined by Joe.
Hey.
And Sammy.
Woohoo.
So I'm going to start us off easy before we dive into the scary stuff. So can you guys think of a time when you have either been on a really good team or in a group that was really good, or in a bad team or group?
Yeah. So prior to being here at LCBC, I worked at Starbucks, and the way that we functioned behind the counter was you had to think of yourself as a team, or you are not going to get through that 8 a.m., 9 a.m. coffee rush of people on their way to work, and they need their caffeine. They're rude, they're mean, they're hangry, they need breakfast, they're running late to work. Oh my gosh, it was the hardest customers during the rush hour of the morning, right? So in order to get through that 2.5 period of rushing around like crazy, you had to function smoothly like a team. Each person had their role, right? So if it was a day where there were certain people scheduled that just did not think of themselves as like part of the team, and they were just off doing different things, not communicating well, then you're going to find spilled milk all over the ground. The Frappuccino bar is going to have flies all over it because you're not cleaning up after yourself. You're not functioning the way you're supposed to. You're going to run out of cups and lids and straws, and people are going to get wrong orders, and you're going to get yelled at. And it's just going to be a really stressful couple of hours as a team because nobody's functioning in their role well and communicating well. But on the days when there were people scheduled where they were like, okay, I understand my role, and I understand I need to communicate and just focus and do the best that I can, then we just functioned well. We got through that rush hour period, and it was a lot less difficult, to say the least. So I could think of days when I was just scheduled with a team that just could not handle that morning rush. And then there were other days where I was scheduled with a team where we were like, dude, we're crushing it, getting those sales, like customers are happy, my mental health is okay, like, you get coffee and you get coffee, and no flies in the Frappuccino bar.
So
that's concerning.
I'm like, I want to look now.
I
don't go to Starbucks very often, but now I'm like, I want to look.
I don't work for them anymore.
It's
so
like, you thought it was a chocolate chip. It's not.
That's what
it's
I'm
a petrified fly.
There's so many questions. You said that, and I was like, everything else you say is kind of it's been interesting, but that statement, I'm like, there's so many questions I have about that.
I was like, okay, so I walked into Starbucks this morning. I picked up my drink. I didn't take note of flies or spilled milk.
I didn't know it was a thing.
Should I be wondering that?
Cups, like all the things now. I'm like,
you could always watch the barista while they're making your drink.
Oh, I mobile order it and then I drive.
You're like, I don't even want to know.
Nope.
I don't want to know. Just take my money. But yes, those are some examples that I can think of teams, good and bad.
I thought of a lot of good teams, and then I thought of in like 4th grade, maybe 5th. I was on a terrible baseball team. Like we lost all year long. Aww. But the cool thing was the end of the year, playing the best team in the league, and we won, and it felt like this championship game. It wasn't at all. But I just remember being so excited, like our team, like it was literally like the run on the field, like
so cute.
Yeah, it was such an amazing time. But it was like interesting that all year long it was miserable while we were losing. But this one moment became this one moment where, like last week when we talked about those like friendships that you build over time and like how you can go through bad times. It was that where we're like, all the bad we went through and now it's all worth it. Look we won this game. And it wasn't a championship at all. It was just a good team that we beat.
They were probably like, I heard this team was so bad.
Yeah,
we don't even
gave
have to try. And you guys were like, nope, this is the one game we're trying.
World Series.
That's funny. I in high school was on a track team. Track is an interesting team dynamic because it's one of those things where you're running individually, but your points collectively determine if you win or not as a team. So we had a lot of girls on our team that were really good at either like high jump or hurdles or whatever. And it got to this point where like they were awesome. Like they were the ones getting us points every meet. And then the rest of us were like, hey, I'm just like here. I'm not really like contributing a lot. I'm having fun, running and stuff. And I remember our coach being like, this isn't an individual sport. Like you are a track team. So like what would it look like for you guys actually to function as a team?
Yeah.
Like how do you cheer everybody on instead of just being like, I'm ready, I'm in the zone. I'm going to go over the hurdles and like not going to knock them down. Or if you're like me, you trip over them and get a massive scar on your leg. So it was like that reminder of like, hey, you actually are a team and you need to function as a team.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say we won every single meet after that because we didn't. But there was one that I remember winning and like I still have a picture on my phone of like us being so like, we won, like we did it. And it's taking that like, we're no longer individuals, but like we're a collective team. So how do you like root for each other as a team thing, which really like changed everything.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Which it's funny because now I can like look at some sports and I'm like, you guys aren't a team. You're just individuals. Better pass the ball. It is basketball, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
So that's a good
Pass the
and
ball.
a bad.
Pass the ball.
It's a
That's the
great
moral of the story.
great piece of advice.
So many advice.
So everybody has probably either been on a really good team or a really bad team. And I think in both situations, they can flip-flop. So for us, we started on bad teams and then really good things happened. And for you, it was both in both situations.
Every day was different.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the flies.
But there's always something that I think all of us can have a shared experience around is that sometimes on those teams you can experience hurt and you can experience pain. Sometimes it's from one person or just like the thing that you're involved in. So what would you guys say to someone who has been hurt either by a person or a team or a group? Like what would you say to them? How would you, I don't know, give them advice or even just help them understand the situation that they're in?
It's a big question.
I know. I told you we were
Joe,
starting
do you
off.
have anything?
We're starting off easy.
Yeah, super easy. The first thing that comes to mind is like, don't allow the pain of that moment to push every person away. Where a lot of times what can happen is you blame everybody for what somebody did.
Mm-hmm.
So like one person hurt you, or maybe it was even a group of people who hurt you, and now every person is out to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And not like blaming the whole. I remember a pastor once saying like he was talking about God. He's like, don't allow, don't forsake the things you know about God for the things that don't make sense about life. So like God is good, and you know that. But just because you're having a bad experience doesn't mean everything in life is bad. In that same way, don't like forsake the idea that yes, there are some bad people and yes, there are some bad moments, but don't allow that even one bad moment, because sometimes it could be a bad moment for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had a bad day, and like, so give grace and mercy in the same way that you would want grace and mercy for like the Starbucks worker who has a bad day because there's flies. Sorry, it's stuck in my head.
Really stuck on the flies. I don't blame you.
But like for that person, they're having a bad day. Like they didn't have everyone show up for work. They didn't have all the things. Like that could be a bad day. If you're in that person's shoes, like what grace and mercy would you want? Like that same thing. So when someone hurts you, you know, can you give grace and mercy out? And then I would say, so when pain happens, don't allow it to push people away, but also don't allow it to distract you from your purpose. Where all of a sudden then I'm like, the pain happen, and now I'm going into isolation, building frustration and retribution, where I'm like, now I want to pay them back. Like now I want, and like you get stuck in that versus like, hey, God will take care of that. I need to take care of what I'm called to do. And God, right now you have this in front of me. So don't allow it to push people away, and don't allow it to like distract you from the purpose that you have for your life. Because the purpose you still have for your life is to love people.
Yeah.
Even when loving people's hard.
Yeah.
Like to the point that Jesus like is like, hey, not just people, but your enemies, love them too. Like the people that you think you shouldn't or don't deserve, like that person. Why? Because you were once that person, and I loved you, and I want you to love them. And yeah, so I think those two things are huge. Like just don't allow it to push everyone away, and don't distract you from your purpose.
Yeah, I think that it reminds me of something that in high school, one of my pastors told me. Like I said, I tripped over a hurdle once. Got a massive
Just
scar
once.
on my. It was actually only once,
Oh,
but
okay.
it looks like, if you ever see my leg, it looks like I've been mauled by a bear. But it's just that I
Nice.
spiked myself as I fell. But I was winning the race, and then I no longer won. But I remember my pastor was like, "Hey, scar tissue is stronger than regular tissue," and I was like, what? I was like, is that like a life lesson, or like, what are you trying to tell me here? But it was a life lesson, and just like, hey, that's reality, that your skin grows back, and it grows back stronger. So when you've experienced pain and you've experienced hurt, like you're learning something. And I think that's kind of like what you're talking about, of how do you take those experiences and never allow someone to experience that? And how do you go beyond that and like make sure that you are the change?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get rid of the hurt? How do you stop it before it might even happen? And it's taking that thing and like making it stronger. That if she didn't tell me that when I was like 15, I would probably be like, oh, this is so annoying. But it's now a scar that I look at nearly every single day, because there's a piece of track stuck in it, and I'm like, when's that gonna come out?
So much we're learning right now.
I know, but it's that thing that I can look at every day and remember that not only am I stronger because I've experienced that, I physically had to learn how to not make that mistake again and again and again, because it was going to cause me pain. But now I can say, like, I'm stronger because of it. I've gotten a great piece of advice from it. And now I can tell people, like, don't do this. And like, this is how you overcome this scenario, which I think is cool. And that reminded me of that.
Yeah.
It's a big story after you were just like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Wow, that one time.
That's great. I would also say, like, keep in mind too, you're not alone in feeling that. And most importantly, you can talk to Jesus about it, because he went through it himself. Like, there's so many examples in the Gospels, in the Bible, of things that happen to Jesus that just break your heart reading them, like being murdered, being spit on, being whipped, even the way that the Pharisees treated him while he was trying to do ministry, being rejected in his own hometown, trying to heal people. His own hometown rejected him when he was trying to do ministry. And so just looking at Jesus's example and how he continued to treat others with love, he rebuked when that was necessary. But overall, he still loved people. He didn't lose sight of his purpose, just like what you were saying. Don't lose sight of your purpose. Continue to try and give people the benefit of the doubt, and see that hurt people. Maybe there's a way that you can kind of curb that hurt in somebody else and be the better person and love on them despite them. You just never know what that could do for someone. But yeah, just looking at Jesus' example in the Bible of how he handled being rejected or being hurt in groups or hurt by people. And the disciples fought all the time too, but they were still disciples. They were still brothers and sisters in Christ. They still had a mission, and they, it's awesome. Just look at that example.
Yeah. So you mentioned the disciples, the Pharisees, and even if we're looking at the Bible, the Sadducees. And I think a lot of times we see hurt, and especially sometimes in the church.
Yeah.
So there's this word that's especially popular right now called church hurt. So how would you guys define what church hurt is?
It's not new. Like you shared some of the stories of like the church hurt happening then. But even Paul has a moment in 2 Timothy where he talks about like everyone deserted me. And you're like, that's hurtful. Like that moment where you're like wanting and hoping. He even named somebody, I can't think of their name right now, but he named someone and says like, they left me. And then he's talking to Timothy and it's like, but you have stayed with me. And in fact, I want you to go bring Mark along, which is like so many connections there of like, there was this loss of relationship that happened and now there's this rebuilding moment of so like all this church hurt and yet at the same time, there's this church healing moment too that's happening. So like one, like it's not new. So although it's new conversations, it's not new because we live and are amongst broken people. And like church is not for perfect people. It's for broken people. He came to heal the sick, not for people who think they're perfect and got it all together, but they're like seeing how I can become more like Jesus. So that's what the church is. And because of that, there's going to be brokenness. There's going to be hurt, but it's not accountability. Like where if someone keeps you accountable, if like you have people in your life, I think there's 3 relationships everyone should have in their life. I'm going to use names, but Paul, someone leading you, a Barnabas, someone walking next to you, and a Timothy, someone you're developing. Like those 3 relationships are key. And if someone's keeping you accountable, if you have a Paul in your life, which you should, like that's not church hurt.
Yeah.
Like that's accountability. That's biblical. If someone corrects you or admonishes you, according to the Bible, what that would say is like, that's not church hurt. That's biblical. But like spiritual abuse, sexual abuse that does happen. Like there are like unfortunate moments. Like first, like the church was meant to be a place of purpose, not pain. It was supposed to be a place of worship, not wounds. It's a place of hope and healing, not hurt. It's supposed to be these things. And yet because it's made up of broken people, brokenness happens. And if you've ever experienced that, like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've done a poor job. I've been the person that's probably maybe not intentionally inflicted pain, and I'm sorry. But I think like it's not new. It is a thing. There are ways that make sure we're defining it the right way.
Yeah.
So you asked about defining it. Like, I think it is those things that I mentioned. It is those things where you feel like people abandon you and walk away from you. Like that is moments where like, yeah, I feel that. And I felt that. People who, again, the church is supposed to be a place about the gospel, not gossip. And yet people gossip. That's hurtful. Like that is a moment of church hurt. So I think those are,
Gossip's a huge thing.
Yeah. So if you were someone that feels like you've been hurt by the church, like what do you do next? Like what would you say to that person who's experienced some bit of church hurt?
I would say something similar to Joe. Like there's imperfect people in the church just trying to do the best that they can. That doesn't excuse abuse, like Joe was saying. Like that does not excuse abuse at all. But we are called as believers to have grace for others and know that we're not perfect as well. And just continue giving it another shot. And also don't internalize those things. Like don't just harbor them and keep them inside and let resentment build up, because that's not good for you. That will hinder your relationship with Christ 100%. But yeah, make sure you're not harboring resentment. Just give it another try. Do the best you can. Know that nobody's perfect. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, and there's always going to be things that we feel really strongly about that maybe a community or like a group that we were in at a church might feel differently about. And I think, if you harbor those feelings and don't ever express them, like you never know if there was a community inside of the community that you could have been a part of. Yeah. So it's, like don't forget of the things that hurt you, but don't allow it to like build up to be this thing.
Don't be an angry, resentful person.
Like don't walk away from something that like a relationship with God is so good. Don't allow that to be the reason that you're walking away. Like if you would get in a fight with your best friend over something silly, most likely it's not going to be the end of the relationship. Yeah, there might be a season where you're like, I just gotta put a pause and think about myself and think about what I want out of this. Most likely you're going to come back to them because you have such a good relationship. And that's what God really wants. He wants us to be in a strong community with good relationships that mean something, that help us grow, that allow us to help other people grow and have people that walk alongside of us. So don't just like never go back to those relationships. Yeah. Have the honest conversations you need to have. And I think that's the most important. Like you have to move towards
definitely
what
don't
you want
give
to.
up.
Yeah.
Do not give up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I have 4 kids. Pray for me. But like, they're all different and unique, super different and unique. And one of them, my 2-year-old Zion, he is a ball of energy and, like jumps on your back. He's just active. Like he's
your poor back.
all the things. And he does that. But like, it would be wrong for me to blame his brothers for something he did.
Yeah.
In the same way, like we're all part of God's family. And yes, people part of the God's family or were maybe false representatives or terrible representatives of God's family did something to you. But you don't blame the whole family for what one did. Yeah. And even then you don't blame the father for what one did. And so like, I think those 2 things are huge and important where people walk away from God because of what someone in the family did. And like, man, I get it. Like there are terrible things that have happened to people. Terrible things that have happened to people in church, but don't allow that to be a bad representation of God who is good, who is loving, who's caring, who's merciful, who's forgiving. Like he is awesome. And like, I get it. I've had moments where I've been frustrated, but like, don't allow that to be misinterpreted or directed wrongly. And then again, because part of the family did that doesn't mean the whole family did that. And like, there are some really good people and I would have missed out on great relationships that I have today if I would have abandoned the entire thing for what a few people did. And I've been there, like I've been hurt, like people have walked away, all the things. And I've probably caused some of that stuff too. But no, like don't walk away from something that is so good. In the same way I was saying it, like don't allow the things that we don't understand about God to forsake the things that you know about him. In the same way, don't allow the things that you don't understand about God's church or the people that go to church and let that be a bad representation of the good things that happen, because there's super beautiful things that happen here. There's communities that come together and help wipe away debt. There's communities that come together that help love others. There's communities that come together and help make a difference around the world. Like the good that is happening. We have hospitals today. We have some of the things that we have in healthcare today because of the church. Like first century church was the one that would go get babies that were thrown in trash because they didn't want those kids, and they were the first ones to go. That's the church. That's the beauty of the church. And yes, there's some mistakes because they're people, but don't blame the entire thing because of a few.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I love that. I think brokenness is so real, and we all need to remember that because it could be us and it could happen to us, and we never know that. So how do you rebuild trust with the big C church again when you've been hurt and you've done that stuff of like, you're not blaming God, but for some people it's going to be hard to come back to the church. How do you build that trust back?
Big question. I think again, like don't lose sight of what the church is supposed to be and think of ways that you can make it better. I think more importantly, if you're frustrated with how something is going in your church, maybe you're the solution to that problem. Yeah. Maybe you're the person God is calling to speak up and bring change to that environment. You just never know. If you're feeling a burden for something, 9 times out of 10, it's because the Lord is maybe trying to nudge you to bring some change, some much needed change. It could be a felt need amongst the community. You just don't know. But I'd say, like, again, like, don't give up. Don't lose sight of what the Big C Church is supposed to look like. Don't lose sight of who Jesus really, truly is. Just Jesus. Forget the church, just Jesus. Who is Jesus? What does he want from you? And how could you make the Big C Church a better place for people? And how can you serve the church better? Because it is more importantly about you pouring into the church rather than what you're getting from the church. You know, not that your needs should go ignored, but yeah, it's more important to think of ways that you can make something better.
Yeah. I'd probably say that differently, but the same, that like God is not a God of trash. He's a God of recycle. So the pain you experience, he'll make purpose out of it. So he doesn't throw away the pain. He'll use the pain. He didn't cause the pain, but he will use that pain to bring purpose through your life. So what if that pain was something that God wanted to use to bring purpose? What if the misery you went through was the ministry God's calling you to? That like you experienced hurt, you experienced deep pain. I'm in youth ministry because the pain I experience in youth, that like I want to help someone else not have to experience those things alone, not have to go through all the things that I went through, and experience them by themselves, like the pain of not like relationship issues and all that kind of stuff. I want to help someone because I didn't know it then. And all the things that I know now and all the things, like God has given purpose behind that pain. And now I want to be a help to others. And I would say, give yourself time. Like it does take time. Like hurt is a real thing. And I don't want to like just kind of dismiss it and be like, all right, like just do something about it. Like, cool, like get over it kind of thing. I don't want to sound like that at all. Cause like there are some really bad hurts. But don't allow that to even be something you worship.
Yeah.
Because I think we can, like, again, not just even in the lights and not even just in this moment, but like every time something looks like that, like the enemy's good at bringing a foothold.
Yeah.
Where anything now, I have this belief that when you have a painful experience as a kid, you create a promise. I will never trust people again. I will never do that again. I will never make myself like foolish again. That promise brings parameters of relationships, and that parameters becomes a prison. Because now I've kept people at a distance. The walls that I meant to build up so people didn't get in to hurt me have become walls to keep me out from having relationships that are healthy. So if that's what happened, what's the promise in that painful experience that God wanted to give you? That when you were alone and you felt like nobody was there and you made the promise that I'll never trust anyone again, was God saying, I will never leave you or forsake you? What's that promise? Because that promise can set you free from all the painful experiences and will help bring healing to the future relationships in your life. But like seeing that is so key, and not allowing that hurtful moment and painful experience to be a place of worship.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay. First of all, if you're listening, like go back 2 minutes, listen to that again, because I will I like need that repeated over me like 10 times. So I just want to say thank you guys, because you both just hit on something so important, and I'm really excited because that's actually what we're going to talk about next week. So thanks for talking about that, and make sure, guys, next week we are going to talk all about what it looks like to be a consumer versus a contributor of the church. How do we do church together if we're supposed to be a contributor? So thank you guys for joining me, and we'll see you guys next week.